So I've got my Deathwatch Chaplain in sub-assemblies, as you can see, and the goal of this is to just make it as easy as possible to paint all of these hard to reach spots, particularly because I want to get into between the legs just on the main body of the bike, and keeping it in separate pieces will just make it easier for me to get the quality and level of painting I want without having to reach into all these different nooks and crannies. So because the Deathwatch army is predominantly black armor, this is really going to be the focal point of the army. And to make it easier on ourselves, we're just basically going to be using a black primer. So for this, I'm going to be using Vallejo's Surface Black Primer, as I always do. And then we're going to give it another airbrush base coat of Vallejo's Black. Now, the reason we do this is because once we start painting the black armor, if we have to go back in and correct or paint any black, this paint does not match this primer. Okay, the two shades of black are slightly different, and so we want to make sure that we have a black base coat that we can then correct and paint back on top of without having any issues. And you can see with the product code as well, the two blacks are different. Really, the main problems I'm going to have with this model, I think, are the purity seals. They are very, very thin, and brown stuff, when sculpted and cast very, very thinly or into thin sheets, is actually quite fragile. It's only when you get into the thicker portions that brown stuff actually has a lot of tensile strength. And so I'll need to make sure that when I'm holding and painting this model that I'm not gripping it and squeezing it in the wrong places, particularly purity seals on the arms and on this bike portion. I think beyond that, this model is going to be very straightforward to paint. Because we're going to be priming a fair number of pieces, I'm going to load some flow improver into my airbrush as I'm priming. I normally, if I'm only priming a couple of pieces, I will just use the primer straight up. But over time, this can get a little gunky, especially as it's drying in the airbrush. So the flow improver helps it just last a little bit longer and prevents any of the splattering that we may find over time airbrushing the Vallejo primer.